Okay, so October 15th this week, Polymarket, the world's largest prediction market, put Donald Trump at 58% odds of winning the 2024 election and Kamala Harris at 42%. But on the 17th, 19 days before the election, Trump rose to 62% and Kamala dropped to 38%. And that's the largest lead we've seen since July. And it's really no surprise because first this week we had JD Vance going on ABC News and blasting Martha Raddatz when she tried to downplay the seriousness of Venezuelan gangs in Colorado.
Migrants, including in Aurora, in Colorado, where Trump said the city had been invaded and conquered by Venezuelan gangs. The Republican mayor of the city said flatly the city and state have not been taken over or invaded or occupied by migrant gangs. So do you support Donald Trump making those claims that the Republican mayor says were grossly exaggerated and have hurt the city's identity and sense of safety? I understand what you're saying, that some people left behind, but he's making these statements that the mayor is flat out disputing.
Well, Martha, you just said the mayor said they were exaggerated.
Grossly exaggerated.
That means there's got to be some element of truth here. And of course, President Trump was actually in Aurora, Colorado, talking to people on the ground. And what we're hearing, of course, Martha, is that people are terrified by what has happened with some of these Venezuelan gangs.
And one of those people that's terrified was the manager of an Aurora, Colorado apartment complex who got beaten bloody for not taking the gang's bribes. He was inspecting a vacated unit when some squatters who tried to bribe him with $500 to overlook the situation, but he refused. Not only was he beaten so bad that he had to be taken to the hospital, but they sent him threatening messages after that, where they revealed his home address and his spouse's name, which, by the way, there is footage of the beating happening. So in my mind, nothing about this is grossly exaggerated.
The incidents were limited to a handful of apartment complexes, and the mayor said our dedicated police officers have acted on those concerns. A handful of problems.
Do you hear yourself? Only a handful of apartment complexes in America were taken over by Venezuelan gangs, and Donald Trump is the problem and not Kamala Harris's open border? Americans are so fed up with what's going on, and they have every right to be. And I really find this exchange, Martha, sort of interesting because you seem to be more focused with nitpicking everything that Donald Trump has said rather than acknowledging that apartment complexes in the United States of America are being taken over by violent gangs. We've got to get American communities in a safe space again. And unfortunately, when you let people in by the millions, most of whom are unvetted, most of whom you don't know who they really are, you're going to have problems like this. Kamala Harris, 94 executive orders that undid Donald Trump's successful border policies. We knew this stuff would happen. They bragged about opening the border, and now we have the consequences, and we're living with it. We can do so much better, but frankly, we're not going to do better, Martha, unless Donald Trump calls this stuff out. I'm glad that he did.
Okay, let's just end that with they did not invade or take over the city, as Donald Trump said. I want to move on to
just a few apartment complexes. No big deal.
Okay, yeah, let's just end it like it didn't happen. More like you're ending it because you either know you're being checkmated and you know that you're wrong and you don't have anything valid to push back on, or you truly believe that this Venezuelan migrant crisis is overblown, which to me is like the biggest spit in the face of people like the apartment owner who got beaten. Which, how can anybody downplay the severity when they're armed, coming in by the dozens, and brutalizing people? Like, where does the line get drawn? And what, because a Republican mayor said that it's overblown, it must be true? And so in that regard, it was very refreshing to see JD Vance not only not take the bait, but also hit her with the zinger or sarcastic remark of his own. Like, she very much deserved that. So that's one thing that I think really helped boost Trump in the polls this week. But then there was also Kamala Harris going on Fox News with Bret Baier.
Vice President, thank you for the time.
Thank you. It's good to be with you, Brett.
You know, voters tell pollsters all over the country and here in Pennsylvania that immigration is one of the key issues that they're looking at this election, and specifically the influx of illegal immigrants from more than 150 countries. How many illegal immigrants would you estimate your administration has released into the country over the last 3.5 years?
Well, I'm glad you raised the issue of immigration because I agree with you. It is a topic of discussion that people want to rightly have.
Why, thank you for that acknowledgement, Kamala. Now, what are you going to do to rectify the problem?
We have a broken immigration system that needs to be repaired.
So your Homeland Security Secretary said that 85% of apprehensions.
I'm not finished. We have an
rough estimate of 6 million people have been released into the country. And let me just finish. I'll get to the question. I promise you.
I was beginning to answer.
And when you came into office, your administration immediately reversed a number of Trump border policies. Most significantly, the policy that required illegal immigrants to be detained through deportation, either in the U.S. or in Mexico. And you switched that policy. They were released from custody awaiting trial. So instead, included in those were a large number of single men, adult men, who went on to commit heinous crimes. So, looking back, do you regret the decision to terminate Remain in Mexico at the beginning of your administration?
We recognized from day one that, to the point of this being your first question, it is a priority for us as a nation and for the American people. And our focus has been on fixing a problem. And we worked on supporting what was a bipartisan effort, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Congress, to actually strengthen the border. That border bill would have put 1,500 more border agents at the border, which is why I believe the Border Patrol agents supported the bill. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States, which is a scourge affecting people of every background, every geographic location in our country, killing people. It would have allowed us to put more resources into prosecuting transnational criminal organizations, which I have done as the Attorney General, former Attorney General of a border state.
Madam Vice President, a couple of things.
Prosecuted trafficking of drugs, guns, and human beings. And Donald Trump, but let me...
Okay, do you want to know the provisions of the bill? It allows emergency authority that bars migrants, except unaccompanied minors, from crossing the border between ports of entry. Once it hits a threshold of 5,000 on average per day for 7 consecutive days, or 8,500 in a single day, which in theory 4,999 per day would be 1.8 million per year. And also we already have Trump versus Hawaii, where Trump wanted to restrict entrance into the USA at the time, which the Supreme Court upheld as within his powers. So for some, enough to kill the bill at least, it felt like a sham and that it wasn't actually doing anything to secure the border. And number two, the president already had that power, which Bret Baier pushed back on.
6 Democrats voted against that bill. It would have allowed 1.8 million illegal immigrants into the country a year. A lot of conservatives had a problem with it. These are the 6 Democrats. But more importantly, back to the original premise, Jocelyn Nungari, Rachel Warren, Laken Riley, they are young women who were brutally assaulted and killed by some of the men who were released at the beginning of the administration, well before a negotiated bipartisan bill. Former President Clinton actually referred to Laken Riley Sunday, campaigning for you in Georgia, saying if those men had been properly vetted, Laken Riley probably would not have been killed. So if it wouldn't have happened, this is well before any negotiation. This is well before Donald Trump got involved in the politics. This is a specific policy decision by your administration to release these men into the country. So what I'm saying to you, do you owe
Bret,
those families an apology?
Let me just say, first of all, those are tragic cases. There's no question about that. There's no question about that. And I can't imagine the pain that the families of those victims have experienced for a loss that should not have occurred. So that is true. It is also true that if a border security had actually been passed 9 months ago, it would be 9 months that we would have had more border agents at the border, more support for the folks who are working around the clock trying to hold it all together.
Madam Vice President.
To ensure that no future harm would occur. And this election in 20 days will determine whether we have a president of the United States who actually cares more about fixing a problem, even if it is not to their political advantage in an election.
Again, you don't need the bill when the president can already issue emergency restrictions when it's necessary. And also, what is she going to do to deter illegal immigrants? And I don't know, make the punishment stricter on those who try to cross the border illegally. Or at the very least, end this catch and release crap, which was addressed by the family of Jocelyn Nungari, who was murdered by an illegal immigrant.
Because of the Biden-Harris administration open border policies catch and release, they were enrolled in the Alternatives to Detention program. This meant that they were released into the United States. It was not even a full 3 weeks later that they would take my daughter, Jocelyn Nungari's life. I believe the Biden-Harris administration open border policies are responsible for the death of my daughter.
That's the early days So do you owe them an apology is what I'm saying.
I will tell you that I am so sorry for her loss. I am so sorry for her loss. Sincerely. But let's talk about what is happening right now with an individual who does not want to participate in solutions. Let's talk about that as well.
But do you want to answer
in all fairness, I told you, I feel awful for what she and her family have experienced.
During that time, you said repeatedly that the border was secure. When in your mind did it start becoming a crisis?
I think we've had a broken immigration system transcending, by the way, Donald Trump's administration, even before.
Okay, wait. Didn't you just say 2 years ago that we had a secure border?
Would you call the border secure?
I think that there is no question that we have to do what the president and I asked Congress to do. Is the first request we made. Pass a bill to create a pathway to citizenship. The border is secure.
We're going to have 2 million people cross this border for the first time ever. You're confident this border is secure?
We have a secure border in that is a priority for any nation, including ours and our administration.
I mean, which is it? You can't have it both ways. You can't say that we have a secure border, but then also say we have a broken immigration system caused by Donald Trump. Now next, I guess we have a little bit on transgenderism.
This is a time when voters, especially here in Pennsylvania, are inundated with commercials and ads. They just want it to stop because it's every commercial. But many of them add noise, but a few of them seem to break through. This particular one from the Trump campaign has gotten a lot of attention.
Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners.
Surgery.
For prisoners.
For prisoners. Every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access.
So are you still in support of using taxpayer dollars to help prison inmates or detained illegal aliens to transition to another gender?
I will follow the law, and it's a law that Donald Trump actually followed. You're probably familiar with, now it's a public report, that under Donald Trump's administration, these surgeries were available on a medical necessity basis to people in the federal prison system. And I think, frankly, that ad from the Trump campaign is a little bit of like throwing stones when you're living in a glass house.
The Trump aides say that he never advocated for that prison policy and no gender transition surgeries
you know what, you got to take responsible for what happened in your
presidency.
administration.
What was that, Kamala? Taking responsibility? You mean how you've been taking responsibility during the course of this interview by passing the buck? Yeah, okay. Now, I think it's very important to note that the first gender transition surgery in prison happened in 2022 under the Biden-Harris watch. So, nice try, Kamala. And I love how Bret is not pulling any punches here.
Yeah, no surgeries happened in this presidency. So your campaign slogan is a new way forward, and it's time to turn the page. You've been vice president for 3.5 years. So what are you turning the page from?
Well, first of all, turning the page from the last decade in which we've been burdened with the kind of rhetoric coming from Donald Trump that has been designed and implemented to divide our country and have Americans literally point fingers at each other. Rhetoric and an approach to leadership that suggests that the strength of a leader is based on who you beat down instead of what we all know. The strength of leadership is based on who you lift up. The strength of an American president, which is one who understands that the vast majority of us have more in common than what separates us.
Madam Vice President, more than 70% of people
that is about turning the page on rhetoric that people are frankly exhausted of, Bret.
More than 70% of people tell the country is on the wrong track. They say the country is on the wrong track. If it's on the wrong track, that track follows 3.5 years of you being vice president and President Biden being president. That is what they're saying, 79% of them. Why are they saying that? If you're turning the page, you've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
But you've been the person holding the office.
Come on.
Madam
You
Vice
and I
President.
both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah, you and I both know it's Donald Trump's fault. But yeah, we gotta tone back the rhetoric. Oh, you mean the rhetoric that's been used to vilify the hell out of Republicans and the rhetoric that almost got Donald Trump assassinated twice? I mean, the smug condescension with her is, on one hand, very infuriating, but it's also fun to watch her melt down.
This is a democracy. And in a democracy, the President of the United States, in the United States of America, should be willing to be able to handle criticism without saying he'd lock people up for doing it.
Okay, the last time I checked, it wasn't the Republicans who weaponized the justice system to prosecute somebody they disagree with, turning what was a misdemeanor into a felony. I mean, seems to me you're the one melting down. Look in the mirror, sweetie.
Let me ask you this, Madam Vice President. You call Donald Trump. You call Donald Trump. He's misguided. You say now
he's unstable. He is unstable, Brett.
He's not well. You say he's mentally not stable.
He's not stable.
Let me ask you this. You told many interviewers that Joe Biden was on his game, that ran around circles on his staff. When did you first notice that President Biden's mental faculties appeared diminished?
Joe Biden, I have watched from the Oval Office to the Situation Room, and he has the judgment and the experience to do exactly what he has done in making very important decisions on behalf of the American people. Joe Biden is not on the ballot.
I understand.
And Donald Trump
but
is.
You talked about it.
And Donald Trump
After George Clooney said within a few minutes of talking to President Biden at a fundraiser that he thought this was not the same Joe Biden that we saw on the debate stage.
Donald Trump is on the ballot.
I understand. You met with him at least once a week for 3.5 years. You didn't have any concerns?
I think the American people have a concern about Donald Trump, which is why the people who know him best, including leaders of our national security community, have all spoken out. Even people who worked for him in the Oval Office, worked with him in the Situation Room, and have said he is unfit and dangerous and should never be president of the United States again.
Okay, let me get this straight. You think Donald Trump is unfit. Got it. And you also think Joe Biden is fit? Is that why you staged a coup to get him forced out of office? But forget all that. Donald Trump is the greatest threat to democracy. Like, seriously, stop it. Answer the question, Kamala.
Madam Vice President, they're wrapping me very hard here. I hope you got to say what you wanted to say about Donald Trump. There are a lot of things
There's more to say. I have
there
much more to
are
say,
a lot of things that people want to learn about you and your policies, and that's why we
I
invited
invite
you
everyone
here.
to go to KamalaHarris.com, and you will see that I have 80 pages of policies that are quite comprehensive and should be accessible to anyone who would like to read them. And it includes what I intend to do about affordable housing, what I intend to do about small businesses, what I do
And that's why we
to
invited you
strengthen
here
our economy,
to see where you were in 2019 and where you are now.
America's military and ensure we have the most lethal and best fighting force in the world.
Madam Vice President,
and
they're giving me a hard rap
Well,
here.
I thank you for the time.
I thank you for the time.
It's good to meet you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I mean, she had the opportunity to talk about her policies, but anytime she was called out, she either just pointed the finger back at Donald Trump, got borderline hostile, and as you can tell in the end, told people to look it up for themselves. And it's funny what Bret Baier said later on.
You know, when the kicker in football, they call a timeout right before he's going to kick the field goal. They're icing the kicker. So we were supposed to start at 5 p.m. This was the time they gave us. Originally, we were going to do 25 or 30 minutes. They came in and said, well, maybe 20. So it was already getting whittled down. And then the vice president showed up about 5:15. We were pushing the envelope to be able to turn it around for the top of the 6 o'clock. So that's how it started. And I could tell when we started talking that she was going to be tough to redirect without me trying to interrupt.
And all this was met with rightful criticism. Lauren Boebert saying, if Kamala Harris can't defend her agenda under some basic questioning, how in the world does she think she can run our country? The questions Bret Baier asked her would be considered standard for anyone else, and for Trump would have been considered a softball interview, but somehow she made a mess of it. She's not ready for prime time, nor is she ready for the White House. The Perimeter saying, Bret Baier gets an award for being the first journalist to throw Kamala Harris a hardball. She struck out and showed her true colors. Whereas conversely, John Harold here said, the media has been so awful that Bret Baier simply is doing his f***ing job is being celebrated like he's some sort of hero. Crazy times. Which bring up great points because yes, Bret handled this interview very well. But at the same time, this is nothing compared to what J.D. Vance and Donald Trump go through with these clearly biased interviewers who just want to have these gotcha moments. But yet, despite those, they're able to come out stronger in the polls. Because for Kamala, if all she's going to do is deflect the responsibility, then how can she expect the people's confidence to run the country? Oh yeah, people are losing confidence, and it's showing. And the window for her to gain people's trust is closing in. Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you're new to this channel, hopefully I've earned a subscription. Here's some videos for you to watch in the meantime. Until next time, peace out.